Our gaze cuts through the crowd and touches something ancient within you. No name, no visible past, just the instant recognition of a presence that time has not erased. It's as if the universe decided to test how much you still vibrate on the same frequency of stories you thought were over. The face changes, but the plot feels the same, like a recurring dream disguised as chance. Quantum consciousness reveals that we do not meet people again, but vibrational patterns asking for resolution. Every new encounter is a memory disguised as opportunity. The soul returns not to repeat, but to finally see what was once invisible. The link between destiny and choice, between what repeats and what awakens. The pattern begins as a whisper. You believe you've met someone new, someone unlike anyone before. The conversation flows, interest blooms, and your hopeful heart thinks, this time will be different. But little by little, familiar gestures resurface. The same discussions with different words, the same fear disguised as care, the same feeling of walking in circles. The face before you has changed, but the energy that manifests is the same one you once swore to leave behind. The universe does not repeat out of irony, it repeats out of compassion. It offers new forms for the same vibration, hoping that this time you will notice it. Quantum consciousness explains that the field does not distinguish between past and present, only vibration. Everything that has not been understood, forgiven or integrated, continues to oscillate within you, emitting a subtle signal that attracts equivalent experiences. It's like a radio frequency that insists on tuning to the same station until you change the inner dial. This invisible tuning shapes the web of meetings and partings, making faces change but keeping the story intact. Not because destiny is cruel, but because consciousness seeks coherence. What has been started must find resolution, and life reorganizes the scene as many times as necessary until the learning is absorbed. On the energetic plane, every unresolved emotion is like a vibrational field trapped within the body. Resentment, for example, is a charge of memory that keeps the heart anchored in the past. When someone new approaches, that dormant frequency activates, and the body recognizes the pattern before the mind does. That is why certain encounters feel inevitable. The impulse does not come from conscious choice, but from the magnetism of unfinished memories. You don't fall in love only with people. You fall in love with the vibration they awaken. Life, seen from the outside, seems like a sequence of distinct relationships, but through the lens of consciousness, it is a continuous laboratory of self-discovery. Each reunion is an apparent repetition that hides a new lesson. The quantum field arranges coincidences to mirror what is ready to be reviewed. The other becomes the moving mirror of your frequency, and the stronger the emotional reaction, the closer the mirror is to the original wound. It is not punishment, it is revelation. The rational mind tries to escape this cycle by cataloging experiences. That relationship was toxic, that friend was deceitful, that boss was unfair. But deep down, the archetype is the same. The pattern does not repeat because the world is unjust, but because consciousness still identifies with the same narrative. And the pattern only ends when the inner script is rewritten, not with new phrases but with new perception. Imagine an actor who, in every lifetime, plays the same role but with a different costume. The audience changes, the scenery changes, but the character remains imprisoned in the same emotion. What frees him is not the end of the play, but the moment he realizes he can choose another role. So it is with the soul. It repeats the scenes until it remembers that it is the author, not the victim. The invisible cycle is less a curse and more a choreography of evolution. Every returning pattern is an invitation from consciousness to harmonize inner frequencies. As long as the heart vibrates in lack, it will attract mirrors that confirm it. When it vibrates in presence, it will find faces that expand, not drain. The cycle ends not through giving up, but through transcendence. Some say time heals, but time only repeats what has not been understood. What heals is perception, and that perception is quantum. It changes the outcome the instant it becomes conscious observation. To observe the cycle is not to judge it, but to see it as part of a greater geometry, in which each repetition is the field's attempt to align you with your own coherence. Awakening begins the moment you recognize the pattern without needing to blame it. When you realize that the face before you is not another mistake, but a message from your own field asking to be deciphered, then the reunion loses the weight of fate and gains the light of lucidity. The other ceases to be the antagonist and becomes the mirror of your oldest frequency. It is the same pattern, but now there is consciousness observing, and that changes everything. The invisible cycle continues until the observer changes vibration. In that moment, the energy that once attracted repetitions begins to dissipate. The people who came with the same script naturally drift away without conflict, like waves that fade after fulfilling their purpose. It is life reorganizing itself toward a new level of coherence. The face changes, the story dissolves, and the learning remains as a new frequency. After all, the universe does not insist on repeating the past. It insists on showing what has not yet been seen. And every time the pattern returns, it is consciousness itself knocking at the door, asking to be recognized in another form. When the gaze stops seeking culprits and begins to perceive vibrations, the cycle no longer needs to restart. It transforms into a spiral and the soul at last begins to rise. Certain experiences do not end, they merely change scenery. Consciousness, when asleep, believes it has left something behind, but the energy of what was unresolved continues to pulse in the invisible field. That is how the past returns, not with the same events, but with the same vibration, dressed in new circumstances. Forgetfulness is simply the mind's way of continuing to believe in linearity. The quantum field, however, knows neither past nor future, only patterns of coherence and disharmony seeking balance. Thus, each new encounter is a memory that has found a new body through which to manifest. A sleep consciousness lives in a state of reaction. It does not perceive that the present is shaped by ancient records that continue to emit frequencies like open wounds. An unintegrated emotion acts as an invisible antenna, attracting compatible experiences. Resentment attracts new disappointments. Fear of abandonment calls forth new departures. The desire for control summons back those who resist. The universe merely returns what energy requests, and energy obeys the field of attention. Everything you persist in emotionally tends to materialize until it becomes consciousness. It's common to believe that we are repeating stories out of bad luck, but what really happens is that consciousness tries to recognize itself through form. The past does not seek punishment or reenactment, it seeks to be seen. Until it is observed without judgment, it will continue to find faces through which to express what still longs to be understood. This is the nature of quantum consciousness. It creates realities in order to observe itself. Awakening begins with a sense of strangeness. You notice something familiar repeating, a tone of voice, a kind of ending, a feeling of helplessness that seems to follow you like a shadow. The instant you recognize the echo, the timeline folds. The now connects to the then, and the entire field reorganizes around the possibility of healing. The past finally finds an awakened witness. In the state of unconsciousness, the mind defends itself with narratives. It says it was betrayed, that it was treated unfairly, that it gave too much. These stories protect the ego but prevent the field from renewing. Forgiveness, in this context, is not a moral act. It is vibrational realignment. To forgive is to withdraw energy from the pattern, to interrupt the flow that kept it alive. When the heart disidentifies from the wound, the field collapses into a new line of probability. The universe responds with new people, new situations, new frequencies. A sleep consciousness calls the past because it fears the void. The known, even when painful, offers a sense of safety. That's why there's an unconscious tendency to recreate what feels familiar. This is why so many people change relationships, cities, or professions, and still realize that the inner feeling remains the same. The environment changes, but the vibration that animates it stays. And until that vibration is observed with clarity, it will continue to generate successive versions of itself. On the energetic level, everything that has not been accepted seeks expression. The repressed parts of the psyche, the denied feelings, the stifled desires, all find their way back through the people who cross your field. They become vehicles for the unconscious to manifest in the light. That is why awakening hurts, because every new other reveals a fragment of what has not yet been embraced within you. Consciousness, upon awakening, realizes it was never the victim of reunions, but the author of projections. The linear mind believes the past is over. Quantum consciousness perceives that the past is a looping frequency, orbiting until it is dissolved by observation. It's like a sound that keeps echoing until someone listens closely enough for it to stop. Observing the pattern is listening to that echo. It is bearing witness to the story trapped in time, and in doing so, something changes silently in the field. The energy that once sought repetition begins to seek release. The process is subtle. Suddenly, situations that once triggered intense reactions begin to lose their power. People who once seemed indispensable become neutral. There is no resentment, only quiet understanding. It's the sign that consciousness has awakened within the pattern. The vibration has been recognized, and recognition dissolves the need for repetition. Every human being lives in multiple timelines, but the mind perceives only one. When awakened, it realizes it has always been conversing with the same archetypes: abandonment, control, fear of being invisible, guilt for existing. These archetypes manifest through different faces, but their essence is the same. And when the heart decides no longer to react to them, the script unravels. The energy that sustained the plot withdraws, and the field opens to new possibilities. Asleep consciousness creates the past in the present. Awakened consciousness transforms the past into wisdom. In truth, nothing repeats. It only manifests until it is understood. And when the gaze becomes lucid enough to see the invisible thread connecting experiences, the past loses its power to command the now. The present ceases to be a stage for repetitions and becomes a portal for creation. In that instant, the universe, which once only returned frequencies, begins to respond with synchronicities, and what once was a cycle becomes learning. The past at last recognizes itself as part of the path, not as its shadow. Nothing in life is an isolated encounter. Behind every crossing of gazes, there is an invisible architecture sustaining the moment. The quantum field, this silent web that interlaces all consciousnesses, organizes the apparent chaos of coincidences with mathematical precision. No person appears by chance. Each presence is a vector of information that the universe uses to adjust frequencies, balance polarities, and remind us of forgotten truths. What we call destiny is, in fact, the point of intersection between two vibrational geometries that recognize each other in time. The field does not operate by morality or desert. It operates by resonance. Similar frequencies attract each other until they transform. Thus, life designs a tapestry in which each thread is a flow of conscious energy. When two threads cross, an interference occurs. One interferes with the other's vibration, revealing where there is harmony and where there is still noise. The reunion happens so that the inner sound becomes purer. It is a kind of cosmic tuning between souls that recognized each other before being born. On the surface, everything seems ordinary. Someone who shows up at work, an unexpected love, a reunion after years. But under an expanded gaze, one perceives that there is a geometry sustaining the event. Lines of energy fold, times overlap, and the universe synchronizes variables so that the encounter occurs at the exact frequency capable of generating learning. Human consciousness rarely perceives the magnitude of this design because it is distracted by forms, the face, the words, the context, and forgets that everything is vibration seeking balance. Each relationship functions as an intersection of fields. When two people connect, it is not only dialogue that happens, but the interlacing of quantum patterns, memories, beliefs, emotions, and fragments of past experiences communicate invisibly. It is a vibrational laboratory in real time. That is why some bonds feel light and expansive, while others demand intense energy. What differs is not the other, but the kind of harmony the encounter awakens or challenges. The hidden geometry of these connections can be compared to a mandala in motion. Each point of light represents a soul in vibration. When their orbits draw near, they form transient patterns, fields of resonance that will exist only while there is mutual learning. When the learning is complete, the mandala dissolves and new figures emerge. The soul does not lose, it merely changes form within the great tapestry. Attachment is born from forgetting this impermanence. On subtler levels, relationships are not fortuitous encounters, but agreements of frequency. Before manifesting in matter, they already existed as possibilities in the field. Consciousness, in choosing a given vibration, selects which probabilities become real. The reunion with certain people is the direct result of this energetic choice. Each one enters your life with a specific function: to awaken a memory, heal an imbalance, close a cycle, or prepare the ground for something greater. There is an almost poetic precision in this design. The person who makes you laugh at the right moment, the stranger who confronts you for no apparent reason, the love that arrives and leaves abruptly, they all belong to the same equation. The quantum field organizes the variables based on vibrational coherence, not linear logic. Sometimes what seems like loss is only a displacement of energy. What seems like chaos is only the geometry adjusting to a new pattern. The necessary reunions are like correction points in the mesh of consciousness. Each one offers the chance to clear accumulated distortions. That is why there are bonds that, though brief, leave deep marks. It is not the time shared that matters, but the intensity of the resonance. Learning can happen in a conversation of minutes or in a coexistence of years. The field measures vibration, not duration. When consciousness awakens to this geometry, the gaze changes. Judgment dissolves, and a quiet respect arises for the mystery of encounters. Relationships cease to be seen as right or wrong, and come to be understood as geometries of transformation. You understand that each person fulfills the exact role the field has designated, and that resisting this only prolongs the cycle. Acceptance becomes the turning point. When you welcome the design of the experience, the very energy reorganizes into harmony. The quantum field, in its silent wisdom, connects souls not to satisfy desires, but to expand consciousness. Each connection is an angular mirror reflecting fragments of the whole. The other's face reveals a part of your own inner geometry, and as long as you look outward for meaning, the pattern will repeat. But when you look within and perceive the symmetry between what you feel and what you attract, the weave is revealed in full, and consciousness, finally, understands that the universe never miscalculated. In the hidden geometry of connections, nothing is lost, nothing is wasted. Everything is interconnected by purposes that surpass immediate understanding. Souls meet and part like waves that overlap, creating new designs in the sea of time. And in the silence between one wave and another, the field prepares the next movement, not to repeat, but to refine the vibration. Because the true reunion does not happen between people, but between frequencies that chose to remember together who they really are. Every relationship is a mirror, even if the reflected image does not always please. The universe does not send people to fill you, but to reflect what you have not yet managed to see in yourself. Each glance, each gesture, each reaction reveals the vibrational state that sustains your experience. Consciousness creates the other as a surface of recognition, and that is why the most intense bonds are also the most revealing. It is not the other who awakens pain. It is the pain that finds in the other a mirror to return to the light. The vibrational mirror is one of the subtlest laws of quantum consciousness. It states that the field returns not what you desire, but what you vibrate. If there is lack, you will find someone who highlights it. If there is guilt, someone will come who amplifies it. If there is genuine love, someone will appear who multiplies it. The universe is not moralistic. It is coherent. It responds to the most dominant frequency in your field, and the other appears as a messenger of that vibration. The face changes, the setting transforms, but the message is always the same. See what still asks for healing. The mind, accustomed to separation, resists this idea. It prefers to believe that the other is the cause, not the reflection. It judges, accuses, projects. However, the more blame it assigns, the more power it gives the mirror. The energy you reject outside remains active within, and the field, obedient, recreates new versions of it. Only when you welcome the reflection honestly does the pattern begin to dissolve. What is accepted loses the power to repeat. The vibrational mirror does not manifest only in romantic relationships. It reveals itself in every human interaction. A colleague who irritates you, a family member who stirs guilt, a stranger who moves you for no apparent reason. Everything is reflection. Each person who enters your field brings a part of your unconscious to the surface. Some reveal dormant lights, others denied shadows. None appear by chance. The quantum field uses each encounter as an instrument of self-knowledge, adjusting the balance between what you show and what you hide. The souls that cross your path are part of a silent pact. They accept the role of mirroring the emotions you need to see, and you, in turn, do the same for them. It is an agreement of mutual evolution. Sometimes the reflection is sweet and brings expansion. Other times it is painful and demands courage to sustain. The important thing is to remember that the mirror is not an enemy. It is a guide. It shows, with precision, what is ready to be healed. Healing does not happen by changing the other, but by recognizing what the other awakens. Quantum consciousness teaches that observation alters the observed. When you observe the reflection without judgment, the energy that fed it transforms. Anger turns into understanding, fear into compassion, resentment into clarity. This transmutation is not theoretical. It is vibrational. The body feels it, the field responds, and reality begins to reorganize according to the new state of coherence. In subtle terms, each person functions as a frequency mirror. Some reflect what you have already harmonized, therefore their presence is light, familiar, expansive. Others mirror the denser parts of your field, those that still vibrate in pain or resistance. They do not arise to punish, but to illuminate. Discomfort is the sign that something within you is ready to be revealed. It is the energy-seeking passage, looking for the path to consciousness. When the soul awakens to this principle, the game of relationships changes completely. Resentment loses meaning, and curiosity takes the place of judgment. You begin to observe each interaction as a living laboratory. Instead of reacting, you ask yourself, what does this situation want to show me? This question is a portal. The instant it is born, consciousness takes the place of the ego, and the mirror ceases to be a threat to become an instrument. The experience of the vibrational mirror does not require perfection, it requires presence. In presence, the reflection becomes revelation. When you remain conscious before what bothers you, something breaks within the old pattern. The emotion that once dragged you loses strength, and a space of stillness arises at the center of the chest. That space is the beginning of healing. In it, the reflection dissolves and love returns to its natural flow, not as a romantic ideal, but as a vibrational state of balance. Each person who arrives is an invitation. Some come to teach, others to remind, others only to reflect that healing has already begun. No one appears in vain. The mirror that challenges you most is the one that brings you closest to yourself, and when the gaze softens, when resistance yields, you realize that the other was never an obstacle. It was the door through which your own light wanted to pass. The universe, in its silent precision, continues to send reflections until the heart recognizes the image. After that, the mirror is no longer necessary. The learning integrates, the vibration changes, and the field begins to reflect new faces, new frequencies, new possibilities. Because true healing happens not by breaking the mirror, but by fully recognizing yourself within it. The instant arrives without warning. A gesture, a phrase, a silence, and something breaks inside the familiar script. The gaze changes focus and sees the entire design. Repetitions, choices, ancient echoes dressed up as novelty. At that exact point, consciousness awakens, and the pattern loses power. The timeline that kept it alive folds before perception, like a wave that dissolves upon meeting its own origin. Seeing the pattern is an act of energy, not intellect. It is quantum collapse happening within the emotional field. The universe, until then sustained by the vibration of the unconscious, responds to a new observation. What was automatic becomes choice. Life ceases to be reactivity and becomes lucid creation. Nothing changes outwardly at once, but everything has already changed within. The body recognizes the turn before the mind translates it. The heart slows. The air seems lighter, and the impulse to defend yourself dissolves. The same scene that before would cause conflict now awakens understanding. The other ceases to be a mirror of pain and becomes a witness to your own vibrational maturity. In that silent space, reality reorganizes itself, obeying the new frequency that emanates from you. Revelation is the point at which the past loses its authority, not because it disappears, but because it is seen in its totality. What once generated guilt or anger reveals itself as part of the geometry that led you to the now. Consciousness, by observing without judgment, releases the energy condensed in the old narratives. The field responds immediately. The connections that repeated the plot dissolve, opening the way to experiences more coherent with the new vibrational state. The pattern cannot withstand the light of presence. It depends on unconsciousness to sustain itself. Awakening, therefore, is the undoing of the structure that supported it. The observer, upon recognizing his own repetition, interrupts the flow that fed the cycle. Collapse happens at the instant of lucidity. The moment you realize you no longer need to react, only observe. Freed from the old tension, the energy reorganizes as a new field of possibilities. There is no triumph in this process. There is silence, a kind of peace without explanation. The body seems to empty itself of memories, and in the space left by them a sense of clarity is born that does not depend on reasoning. It is the sign that the field has reconfigured. The pattern, now dissolved, leaves only the essential learning. Everything that repeated was merely consciousness trying to see itself from another angle. Revelation does not require grand rituals, it requires attention. In everyday life, it manifests in the smallest choices. The tone of voice that once would have been aggressive and now is calm, the impulse to blame replaced by a long breath, the desire to run away transformed into presence. Each conscious microaction collapses an old line of probability. This is how the universe changes, not by magic, but by vibrational coherence. The instant of revelation is not the end of the cycle. It is the birth of a new one. Consciousness, in recognizing the pattern, inaugurates a broader timeline, where life ceases to be correction and becomes creation. People remain the same, but their meaning changes. The mirror no longer shows wounds, it reflects potential. The experience is not punishment, it is continuity of expansion. In this new state, reality becomes malleable, synchronicities increase, encounters flow naturally, and time seems to cooperate. Everything happens with a precision the mind could not plan. The energy once fragmented gathers at a single point, presence. The past ceases to be a force and becomes a backdrop. The story no longer governs you, it only inspires you. The instant of revelation is the border between I react and I observe. Crossing it is to assume the role of conscious creator of your own vibration. The field responds to this immediately, adjusting the scenery, changing faces, clearing memories. Transformation does not come from struggle. It comes from the gaze that finally sees. If this recognition has already touched something in you, if at some moment in life the pattern revealed itself and you felt the change happen from the inside out, write in the comments, "I saw the invisible thread and I choose the new timeline." This sentence anchors the vibration in the field, declaring to consciousness that the cycle has been seen and dissolved. And if this message brought you clarity, like this video, each gesture of conscious vibration spreads this frequency and helps other souls to awaken as well to the instant of revelation. Detachment does not begin with the act of letting someone go, but in the instant you understand it was never the other who filled you. It is a silent recognition. The love that seemed to come from outside was always vibrating within, only reflected in different faces. The crossing of detachment is the return to the source, not as an escape from the world, but as a reconciliation with your own center. For a long time, the soul believes it needs a mirror to recognize itself as lovable. It seeks in the other the confirmation of its existence, the reflection of its own light. And as long as the gaze remains turned outward, emotional dependence disguises itself as love. Attachment is born at that point, from the illusion that fullness is something to be found, not remembered. Each relationship becomes an attempt to hold on to a reflection that by nature is fleeting. The quantum field does not condemn this search, it understands it as a phase of learning. Every bond is a bridge. Some lead to expansion, others to a confrontation with one's own lack. In both, the purpose is the same: to awaken consciousness to the fact that the source of love is not in the mirror, but in the vibration that generates it. Detachment is the crossing that turns love from projection into presence. This crossing is rarely calm. There is a moment when the heart feels suspended between two worlds, the old, which asked for validation, and the new, which asks for silence. In this interval, fear arises, the fear of losing, of being alone, of not being seen. But it is in this emptiness that the field reorganizes. The energy that once stretched outward returns to the center. Love ceases to be expectation and becomes frequency. Detachment is not coldness, it is freedom. It is to love without demanding permanence, to recognize the value of presence without wanting to imprison it. In a state of expanded consciousness, the other ceases to be a harbor and becomes a passage. Each soul that crosses your path is a spark of the same source, offering the opportunity to feel love in different intensities. And the more the heart aligns with this perception, the less need there is to control the movement of life. Finding love at the source is discovering that feeling does not depend on the object, but on the vibrational state. The quantum field responds to the degree of coherence between emotion and consciousness. When there is alignment, love flows naturally, even in the absence of someone specific. The body becomes a channel, not a container. The energy that once sought return expands in all directions, creating a gentle and stable magnetism. It is love in its pure form, not the kind that desires, but the kind that emanates. Attachment, at its core, is the fear of losing the connection with the source. By believing that love dwells in the other, consciousness transfers the power of its own vibration. But as it awakens, it realizes that the other only reminded it of what already existed. No true relationship is lost, it only changes form within the field. The soul does not stop loving, it only learns to love more freely. During the crossing of detachment, time seems to slow down. Silence gains texture. The absence of someone begins to turn into an inner presence. Little by little, longing becomes gratitude, and emptiness turns into space. This is the point at which the soul reconnects with the source. Love is no longer a search, but a state of being. The heart, once anxious, now beats in rhythm with the universe. The return to the source is the true reunion. There is no spectacle, nor promise of eternity. There is a serene lucidity, like that of a river recognizing the sea. What once was lack becomes communion. Consciousness understands that love belongs to no one, because it is the substance of everything. Detachment, then, is not an end, but the beginning of vibrational freedom. To love without attachment is to allow the flow of life to reveal new forms of connection without fear of loss. It is to understand that each relationship fulfills its role at the exact time, and that the end of a story is only the redirection of energy to another dimension of experience. The mature heart does not close doors, it simply lets the wind pass. This crossing does not erase love, it expands it. By no longer seeking it in the reflection, you find it at the source and everything changes meaning. The world, once full of separations, becomes a field of resonances. The other ceases to be a necessity and becomes a choice. Presence replaces urgency, and consciousness rests. At the end of the crossing, love is no longer measured by reciprocity, but by vibration. It recognizes itself, flows without demanding, exists without reason. Detachment, at last, reveals itself as the way back home. The point at which the soul remembers it never stopped being love. It had only forgotten where its glow was born. Reality begins to move the instant the heart changes its vibration. No mental effort is capable of altering the plot if the emotion still pulses at the old frequency. The quantum field responds to coherence, not to isolated intention. When feeling realigns, the universe reorganizes circumstances, switching faces, places, and situations as if silently editing the script of your life. The change is subtle but deep. It is not the world that changes, it is the resonance that sustains it. The heart is the command point of vibration. Each heartbeat emits an electromagnetic signature that informs the field which reality should manifest. When that signature carries memories of fear, control, or guilt, the field reproduces compatible experiences. But by replacing those frequencies with states of gratitude, acceptance, and presence, the field responds with more harmonious scenarios. This is the principle of vibrational reprogramming, not a metaphysical theory, but a process of energetic coherence. Reprogramming begins the instant the body becomes aware of its own reactions. Each emotion observed without running away is an old code being rewritten. Anger, when felt with presence, loses its distortion and reveals the pain beneath it. Pain, seen with tenderness, turns into wisdom. This is how the inner field is cleansed. The energy, once fragmented, flows again and begins to emit another kind of signal. The vibration changes and reality responds. Relationships are the first to shift. People who once seemed indispensable begin to drift away naturally without rupture. Others, until then distant, come closer with lightness. The universe changes the cast according to the new frequency. This dance is not loss, it is attunement. Each soul that leaves takes with it what has already been learned, and each soul that arrives brings a new code of expansion. Life reorganizes encounters to keep the flow of evolution. Vibrational reprogramming does not depend on effort, but on surrender. The more you try to control the process, the more resistance you create. The mind wants to decide who should stay, what should happen, how it should be. The heart, however, only vibrates. It does not make plans, it emits frequency. When consciousness surrenders to its rhythm, the field comes into coherence and begins to mirror new realities naturally. At that point, the universe seems to conspire in your favor, but in truth it only responds precisely to the new inner state. The old pattern, once dissolved, leaves empty spaces. For a time, it may feel like loneliness, but it is only the silence before the new harmony. The field needs a pause to recalibrate. The energy that once sustained disharmonic bonds and settings is now free to create new probabilities. Emptiness is the womb of the new cycle. Resisting it is to remain trapped in the past. Welcoming it is to take part consciously in creating the future. Vibrational reprogramming is, in essence, an act of forgiveness. Not forgiveness directed at someone, but energetic forgiveness. The moment the heart decides to release what kept it bound to the old timeline. This forgiveness dissolves the noise that distorted the frequency of love. The field, upon sensing this release, updates reality immediately. Time bends before vibrational coherence. What once seemed impossible begins to take shape effortlessly. The universe does not understand words, it understands vibrations. That is why repeating affirmations without feeling is ineffective. True change is born from within, from emotion aligning with intention. When feeling and thought vibrate at the same frequency, the quantum field recognizes the signal as truth and responds accordingly. This is the language of conscious creation, the harmony among mind, heart, and presence. With the heart reprogrammed, life becomes a new mirror. The same situations cease to trigger the old reactions. What once generated fear now awakens curiosity. What once seemed like loss now sounds like liberation. The field expands and consciousness begins to attract experiences that no longer come to correct, but to celebrate. This is the true change of caste. Not the swapping of people, but the replacement of vibrations. In the new field, time loses rigidity. Synchronicities increase, answers arrive faster, encounters seem orchestrated by something greater. The mind, which once tried to understand, now simply observes the flow with reverence. The universe reveals itself as a dynamic mirror, responding not to what you think, but to what you have become. Changing frequency is not fleeing the past, it is understanding it to the point of no longer needing it. Vibrational reprogramming is the point at which love becomes your natural language and the universe reorganizes to speak the same tongue. In this state, the field does not repeat, it only creates. And the heart, finally free from the density of old emotions, beats in sync with the whole, not asking, not expecting, only emitting the silent frequency of one who has learned to be their own source. After the vibration changes, the field begins to attract a different kind of presence. Relationships stop being reunions of patterns and become points of expansion. Magnetism is no longer based on lack, but on completeness. The heart, once programmed to seek what was missing, now recognizes within itself the source of love. And because of that, everything that approaches vibrates in tune with freedom, not with need. This new magnetism is silent, yet unmistakable. It doesn't shout, doesn't chase, doesn't beg. It simply radiates. The people who arrive in this new field don't come to test, correct, or mirror wounds. They come to add vibration, to create broader realities. The bond is built not from the fear of losing, but from the joy of sharing. It's a relationship founded on mutual expansion, where each one recognizes the other as an extension of the same flow of consciousness. Love ceases to be a contract and becomes a communion of frequencies. In the old field, magnetism was reactive. The unconscious vibrated in lack, and the universe responded with experiences that revealed it. Now, the energy is proactive. Conscious vibration creates instead of repeating. The heart, free from noise, works as a magnet of pure resonance. It attracts what is in coherence with the new state and naturally repels what is not. There is no effort in this selection. The field itself performs the filtering. The relationships that remain are those that sustain the vibration of expansion. The new magnetism doesn't promise the absence of challenges, but their quality changes. Conflict, when it arises, doesn't generate rupture. It generates awareness. Differences cease to be threats and become points of learning. Communication becomes more transparent, touch more present, the gaze more integral. Everything flows at a calmer rhythm because the fear of loss no longer dictates the pace. The time of the soul replaces the time of urgency. At this level of vibration, attraction ceases to be an emotional impulse and becomes energetic recognition. It's as if souls identify each other by vibrational signature. An encounter isn't explained, it's felt. Synchronicity increases, coincidences multiply, and destiny seems to reveal itself naturally. But it's not destiny that leads, it's frequency. The field responds to the new state of being, and the universe delivers equivalent experiences. Relationships of expansion bring lightness even in intensity. They don't demand definitions, because the connection speaks for itself. There is a comfortable silence, a space that allows freedom without weakening the bond. Love becomes presence that inspires instead of binds. Words cease to be attempts at control and become spontaneous expressions of the shared flow. It is love in its quantum state, a dance between two consciousnesses that no longer need to complete each other, only to coexist in harmony. The new magnetism is born from internal alignment. The energy no longer seeks outside what it has already found within. This alignment creates a field of coherence so stable that only what vibrates in the same integrity can remain. People who still resonate with old frequencies drift away naturally, without conflict. There is no need to cut ties, only to allow. The field makes the movement, and the heart remains at peace. On the subtle plane, this new phase manifests as perceptual expansion. You begin to notice subtleties, the weight of a word, the texture of a gaze, the energetic field of an environment. Intuition refines itself, and decisions start being made not by logic but by resonance. The body becomes a compass, and the heart its guide. This is true vibrational intelligence, choosing not out of fear but out of coherence. Relationships born from this vibration have a different nature. They are spaces of co-creation, where two fields unite to generate something neither could create alone. Love becomes a creative force, not a pursuit. It's an energy that drives projects, awakens gifts, expands horizons. The meeting between two coherent consciousnesses generates more consciousness. This is expansion, the universe experiencing itself at ever higher levels of harmony. The new magnetism also brings discernment. The soul learns to recognize what is compatible and what is dissonant without drama. Old illusions lose their charm, and the glow of appearances no longer seduces. The focus shifts from desire to vibrational truth. What doesn't sustain authenticity doesn't endure. What is real remains. This natural selectivity is not judgment, it's energetic maturity. When the heart reaches this state, love ceases to be a promise and becomes a daily practice. There's no longer an expectation of permanence, only the certainty of presence. Each encounter is celebrated as a manifestation of the expanding field. Each farewell is understood as a change of frequency. Magnetism stops attracting repetitions and starts inviting experiences that broaden consciousness. The new magnetism is not a privilege, it's a consequence of coherence. It is born the instant you become whole enough to no longer need mirrors. The universe responds with new human geometries, new bonds, new experiences that reflect the same state of completeness. Love ceases to be a path to find yourself and becomes the natural expression of one who already has. In the end, it becomes clear that it was not the faces that returned, but the vibration that asked to be seen. Each reunion was only the soul calling for itself, trying to remember the love that was never lost. The cycle completes when the gaze becomes whole, when the other ceases to be a mirror, and becomes an extension of the same light. The true reunion happens within, between who you were and who you finally remembered to be. If this journey made sense to you, write in the comments, "I recognize the call of the soul," so that I know you've reached the end. And if you wish to keep walking through these themes and expanding this awareness, subscribe and remain in this vibration with me.